we're gonna do, welcome by the way, we're gonna do a little Vinyasa practice. We're gonna ramp up to that. So we're gonna start laying down on our back. Now, I like, especially in the morning, I like to do a little bit of a chest opening kind of position. So I'm gonna use a blanket. This is not a complicated circumstance, but essentially what I've done here is I folded the blanket twice, once in each direction. And then you just check and see, like, how long do I need it to be in order to cover most of my spine and still support my head. And for me, I can fold it one more time. For other people, you might have to roll it up on that longer edge. And depending on the blanket you're using, you might want to roll it more as a tight cylinder, which will make it a little bit thicker, a little more firm. Or you can make it into a pranayama bolster by folding it over about, I don't know, 5 or 6 inches, and then either accordion folding it if that would be better, or just roll it. If I just roll it into thirds, that's a pretty good place to start. Okay, so then I'm going to put that down lengthwise so I can lie down over it, lay down, whichever the right word is, so that my head is supported and this goes down about to the bottom of my rib cage. And then I'll show you options for the legs in a second. So this is not a super large structure, if that's the right word. If I had a thicker blanket, I might be a little higher off the ground, but it's enough. All I need really is for there to be a little bit of a lip over which my arm and my shoulder can kind of begin to stretch, or chest can begin to stretch over the edge. So this is all I really need. So the legs can be in any of these 3 positions. So this is constructive rest, where you just let the feet get far enough away that the legs get stable. You can certainly just stretch the legs out straight, which for me makes this a little bit, like, pulls me a little bit more into a little bit of a lift, so I get a bigger stretch across the chest doing the straighter legs. That might not be true for everyone. And then you could also do a little butterfly shape, which that settles me back and takes away some of the pull, but I get a little more inner thigh stretch here. So you can choose whichever one of those is suiting you best for today. We're going to spend a couple minutes just settling in, breathing, getting present. Letting go. So relax around the eyes and around the mouth. To increase the stretch across the bigger chest muscles, I could take the arms out a little wider. I'm going to keep mine just a tiny bit closer to the body because I'm really concentrating on letting the shoulder blade relax, and I want to get to the deeper muscles, which means if I overemphasize the bigger muscle, I will lose some of this emphasis on the more stabilizing muscles of the shoulder. They don't have a lot of sensation, not as many nerve endings going to the inside muscle as there is to the outside muscles of the body, but still, I'm feeling this kind of sense that my arm bone is dropping back. So we're going to stay for like another 6 breaths or so. Now, if you have a situation where you for long periods of time you lean forward or the arm bones rolled forward, whether that's just a postural thing or you work with your arms forward like as a hairdresser on a computer or you drive for a living, this kind of a practice can be really, really beneficial to do almost every day to kind of reset the postural habits that come up for that with the shoulder, which lead to all kinds of shoulder imbalance. So if this is something that you really are finding some benefit from, like keep it and do it every day at your house. Just this one pose, just letting yourself open up. So we'll take one more big breath here. And then we're just going to see what happens. So we're going to roll to the side, slip out whatever you have underneath you. If you weren't using anything, you could just stay where you were. So maybe you just didn't have anything handy. So then I just always check to see how did it impact my body. And no matter what choice I make, whether I use the blocks that are more firm, whether I use a blanket that's a little softer, or something in between, like one of the yoga bolsters, always there's a pleasant sensation when I'm done. So with the blanket, I can kind of feel like this little impression is left behind, but most importantly, it feels like my arm bone just dropped backwards into my shoulder a little bit. So there's a sense that there's been a little bit of a release kind of deep in the front of my shoulder, which is, I appreciate. So we're gonna do this little, we're gonna keep this little shoulder thing going and do a movement pattern. So we're gonna roll to one side, and you can take your blanket and make it into a little pillow for your head if you like. Or if it's not a big deal for your head to rest on the floor, that's fine too. So I'm laying on one side, I've got my, I'm on my right side, so my right arm's extended on the bottom and then my left arm's up here on top. And I'm just gonna make sure I've got a full range of motion without hitting any furniture or plants. Yep, I'm doing pretty good. So we're gonna stretch into the arm, and as we make this circle, we're stretching out as far as we can go until we get to about the chest height, and then you can get a little softer with that. So reaching out nice and long, bringing the arm around. We'll do that about 3 more times. Just trying to feel out that range of motion in the shoulder joint. I think I've got one more to go. Oops. As I make more space, my arm gets a little longer and start touching furniture. All right, so once I'm back here to the center, I'm going to keep stretching this arm, and to do that, I'm going to grab hold of my big toe on this top leg. I'm going to keep my bottom knee bent for a second, and then as I extend this leg, now this may be too much, so you might wind up with a strap or something in your hand, like a towel, to aid you, but I'm going to push with my foot so that I'm getting a stretch in this shoulder, and then I'm going to engage my core to help me stay stable and stretch out my bottom leg, so that becomes a little more challenging. So I'm still laying on my side. I could swap out the pillow if I wanted to, but for the most part, I'm just trying to give this arm a little bit of a tractioning away. Now this pose is named after the couch that the Hindu god Vishnu sleeps on, which is made out of a bunch of snakes. So if it feels like your body is writhing a bit, it probably is. Maybe that's why they called it that. Oh, which it delights me. I love weird yoga pose names. Anyway, we're going to take 2 more big breaths here. Just kind of tractioning the shoulder as best I can, trying to let my body get heavy while I'm pulling on my arm with my toes. Okay, so now I'm going to come back to the center. Keep this left knee up. As we roll to the center, we're going to put the left leg out all the way straight. So I'm going to put my right foot on the floor in a constructive rest. I'm going to glide my left leg all the way out straight, toes pointing up, foot flexed, reach out through the hips. I want to stretch this hip flexor out as best I can. Then I'm going to bring the knee straight up and curl up towards it. Keep your head in your hands, kind of push it back so your neck isn't doing all the work there. Your core has to do the work. All right, extend that leg out nice and long, and then curl in straight up the center. And then one more time straight up the center. Stretch out through that front of your hip, and then curl it in. And then we're going to go to this outside left elbow with the leg. So I'm going to stretch down the center, feel that hip flexor open up, and then curl it into the side. Stretch it out, feel the toes go back up, and feel that length through the front of the hip. and then curling it in, and then one more time reaching it out. So we're just giving our psoas a little strengthening and a little lengthening. Now I'm going to bring the knee over towards this right elbow, so I'm coming across and doing a little twist, stretching it out. Oh, it feels good to stretch it out, and then curl it in, stretch it out. We're going to do that one more time. Curl it in. And then once again, you can let go of your head, but stretch that left leg out, and then you're just going to pivot the leg through an internal and external rotation. So the toes go right and the toes go left. And just feel how that changes the muscles right there on the front of the hip. As the adductors and abductors and the internal and external rotators kick on. They're all friends. And then we're going to draw the leg back in and rest for a moment, and then just notice if there's a difference on the left side versus your right side. So my left arm, I would swear to you, is a little bit longer. It just feels a little different. And then my left hip there's not a big sensation outwardly, but it does feel like my left hip is a little deeper in the socket. And if I even put my thumb right on that connective tissue band, as the psoas of the iliacus, the iliopsoas band of connective tissue go over my hip, I can tell that the left one has descended in. So the femur bone has dropped back into the socket and is giving me a little bit more room right there at the front of the hip, which is cool. So it encourages me to do the exact same thing on the right side. So I'm going to flip around so my voice will stay more or less directed toward you, but you could just roll over onto your other side. So we're going to start with the shoulder. Now I'm going to need to give myself a little bit more room on this side of the room, so hopefully you can still see me. So my right arm is the top arm. My left arm is extending out along the bottom. I've got my knees bent to help create stability. I'm going to reach out through that right arm and take it all the way through this huge range of motion. And again, once you get to about chest height, it can go really smoothly, but stretch this whole upwards position, like this kind of rainbow arc over your head. And if you've got some muscles that are a little bit tender, you'll definitely find them, so be kind. I'm going to do that one more time. And then once I come back, I'm going to do my little Vishnu's couch pose, which I'm trying to remember the name of it. It starts with an N, Naga something. In any case, I can't remember the exact word for the creature, the multi-snake creature. In any case, it's sort of like a hydra except just snakes. So I'm pushing with the toes, so I'm getting the stretch in the shoulder. Again, I'm going to try to make my core do a little bit of work to hold me stable here, because it's fun to do core work. Like, why not? If you have an opportunity. And as this kind of lets go, I, can push a little bit more on my toes. It's like pushing on the gas pedal, kind of pushing the toes upward toward the ceiling, and trying to let my arm and my shoulder get heavy, so there's a sense of kind of dropping a little bit. Two more breaths. Sometimes I'll hold this for a couple minutes, but I feel like we've done enough for today. All right, so I'm going to keep this guy floating for now. And this guy, I'm going to bring in. So that is my left leg now is in the constructive rest position. This right leg I'm going to let glide out along the floor, so that I can get this really big stretch through that right hip flexor. And then I'm going to bring the knee straight into the center, curl up. And again, use the abdominal muscles and not the neck muscles if you can help it. So push your head backwards, push, curl in, and stretch out, because it feels nice. Curl in. Now we're going to the outside of the right elbow, so we're going to stretch that leg out nice and long, and then bring it out to the sides. We've got a little bit of an abduction and a tiny bit of rotation. Stretching out. Bringing it in, now we're going to take the leg across, a little bit of internal rotation, a little bit of adduction, and twisting with the abs. So we'll fire up the obliques on that left side. Well, really all of them, let's face it. Okay. So then I'm going to stretch out here, that's my third one, so I'm good. I'm going to hold on for just a second and just pivot that whole leg bone from the socket all the way to the ankle. I've got one long kind of secure lever, and then I'm just rolling it internal and external rotation. Feel how that fires up all these little muscles. I love it. It's really cool to feel what muscles take over for the internal portion versus the external portion, and which ones are sore. So sometimes they're sore. And then I'm going to glide that leg in and bring both my hips back into constructive rest position. And then I just check in, like, did it make a difference? And it sure as heck did. So now my right hip has descended in the same way. So the psoas muscle is kind of my focus right now. We're moving into late summer. Late summer in traditional Chinese medicine, and even to some degree in Ayurveda, is the season of the stomach and the spleen. So in Chinese medicine, the stomach and the spleen are companions. It makes sense, kind of in a weird way. So the stomach is, clearly where all of our food goes, and it's the first place where, nutrients are broken down so that they can be absorbed by our intestines. But in the stomach is really this kind of first place, the kind of holder of all the nutrition that we take in. Spleen is an organ that holds red blood cells, so it allows the body to replenish its red blood cell supply by storing them. It does some other things probably, but that's its primary job. So the two of them are really about how, our intake or outtake or our expenditure of energy, how we care for ourselves, how we nurture ourselves. And so for that reason, and I think the season with the biggest bounty of the earth's produce, whether that is fruits or vegetables or whatever, this is the zenith of all of that fresh food. So this is the time where we would naturally be kind of inclined to consider storing for future reference and also nourishing ourselves. So when we do that, the meridian line for that, those two run up the top of the shin, up the top of the thigh, through the front of the hip right here. They disappear and then they come back out around the chest, and then they travel up the neck and around the mouth. So when I do yoga practices for seasons, and I kind of try to do that all the time, but for this one, focusing on the hip flexors, focusing on opening the chest and relaxing around the mouth are kind of the things. So it's also summer in Ayurveda. One of the summer practices is to practice with your eyes closed, so that you're putting out a little bit less energy so you can store a little bit more of your own energy. Summer is a season that asks us to really put out a lot of, it's a very yang season. It asks us to really draw outward and kind of go out of ourselves a little bit. So if you're feeling a little depleted, practicing with your eyes closed is one way that you can kind of give yourself a little bit more like a battery charge. Your practice can be more about an inward energy charge, not so much outward. So I'm going to give myself one long body stretch here, so now that I'm done lecturing about what my theories and motivations are. I don't know if that's even interesting to you guys. But in any case, I'm going to bring myself up so that I can get into an all fours position. So I'm just going to give myself a little roll. And from here, let's set this aside. I don't need that right away. But I'm going to do a few little rounds of cat. So I also like to do these little sidewinder actions. So kind of bending to the side, doing a round shape, more of a swayed shape. And sometimes I'll do the side bending in the sway, sometimes pull it back to sort of neutral. And then sometimes doing the little sidewinder as a rounded shape is kind of fun. So you decide like where all of the movements of your spine need to go. Now we're going to take the right leg out behind us and then the left arm out in front. Give that a big long reach. one more breath there. Draw in through the sides of the waist a little bit, curl in. Maybe your forehead and your knee touch, or your elbow and your knee touch. Maybe you're just gonna curl up a little bit. Stretch out. If it's too much to do both, just put your hand down and do just the leg. 2 more. 1 more time. So then we're gonna bring this right leg forward. And I'm gonna pick myself up, but I'm gonna start with my hip a little bit more conservatively arranged. This foot quite forward, so that I've got some room to move. So I'm gonna move forward until I feel that stretch in the front of the hip. Then I'm gonna back off of it a bit. And I'm gonna surf back in and see, is it in the same place? Yep. And I'm gonna back off of it a little bit. And then I'm gonna go just to the point where I just feel it and add a little bit more of a back bend to this lunge. So I'm pulling on the bigger part of the muscle and a little less on the connective tissue portion. Two more breaths. I'm going to send my arms down. Now, I'm going to back myself up a little bit. I'm going to bring both hands to this diagonal. I'm going to come back to the lunge. Now I want to be careful with this hip. So I'm going to do these little chaturangas. So I'm going to lower down and then push back up. So my upper body's doing chaturanga dandasana, my legs are still in this lunge. Lower down, push back up. Lower down, push back up. Try to keep the elbows close to the ribs. Lower down, push back up. 1 more time. Lower down, push back up. And then I'm going to straighten out my front leg and kind of fold into this diagonal. Now this gives my inner part of my hamstring quite a big stretch. So you can keep the knee bent a little bit more if it's too intense. Now I'm going to meander around to the front here. And so I shift this hamstring stretch to the outer side. I'm going to pick my toes up a bit, get the calf muscles. Now I'm going to bring both my hands back to the left side so I can sweep that right leg back, give it a little shake. And then bring that guy down. And then notice the 2 hips. Ooh, your spine. You might do a few more rounds of cat shapes. And then bring your left leg forward. Again, my right hip and my left hip are different animals, so I want to move in to this right side, just feeling out how far in I should go, and then I'm going to back off. And then I'm going to go in again and just see if the line has shifted. It rarely does. It's usually pretty solid, but it may be different for you. So I'm going in till I just feel that stretch, and then I'm going to add the length and a little bit of back bend to the rest of this. One more breath here. All right, so I'm going to back off just a little bit, come down. Again, I'm going to come to the diagonal with my hands. Pretty close to wrist right under shoulder, maybe slightly forward of that. And then being mindful of this hip in terms of how far I lower down. I'm going to lower down and push back up. Again, I'm just going into this little chaturanga shape, trying to hold my shoulders really stable. So as I lower down, really pulling my shoulder blades onto my back a little bit, try to hold them steady. Last one. Okay, then I'm going to go into a straighter leg with this diagonal. And again, for me, it's a hamstring stretch, but it's really wrapping around the inside of the inside edges. There's 3 muscles back there for most of us. And so the 2 that are closer to the inside are the ones I really feel it in. Just to balance that out, I'm going to take one more breath here. And then I'm going to move over a little closer to the right over the leg, pick up the toes, so that now it really focuses me more around that outside edge. on the inside. Take that leg back, give it a little shimmy, bring it down. I'm going to take a moment just in a child's pose just to begin to sort of feel where that landed me and to wiggle. Give my sacrum a little release. And if you're up for it, let's go to downward facing dog. And take a few moments to check in. So once again, I'm going to check in with my shoulders. So the shoulder blades, some people say the shoulder blades should get really super depressed, as low as you can make them go to your hips. Some people say up closer to the ears is better. I just like to experiment. And usually I find somewhere in the center of those two ideas where the shoulder blades feel like they really merge into my upper back, and I've got lots of nice support and strength there. And once I find that spot, then I just hold steady and let the legs become my focus. Trying to get my calf muscles a little more engaged here with the movement. Now, when you're feeling like it's time, you just walk yourself into a forward bend. You can give your shoulders and your wrists a little rinse. Now bend your knees as much as you need to so that your torso kind of rests more on your thighs in the forward bending shape. And then we're going to come up halfway so the back gets level. And then fold back over, bending the knees, and come up halfway. Let the back get level. Bend and fold over, and then one more time. Coming up halfway, and then come all the way to standing. Give yourself a nice big stretch. Right. So we're going to find a mountain pose. Get a quick drink of water and then do that. So the toes are going to point forward, about a hip's distance or so apart. Maybe it's better if your toes touch. Feel your knees let go a little bit, feel your shoulders lay down on your back. So we almost find in that same position that we might find with downward dog, not too much, not too little, somewhere right in the middle. And then we're going to just take all of the body weight and shift it into the right side, and then bring the left ankle up on top. So whether it goes on top of your thigh or on top of your shin, depends on your knee and your hip. And then bend in so that you're in kind of a chair shape. Now you can do your arms in a chair pose, you can pray for balance, or you could wrap your arms around behind your back if you want. And so just hold and steady. This balancing pose here. Can you feel yourself kind of engaging a little bit more through that hip flexor to hold yourself in this position? Last big breath. And then we're going to pick up this leg and step back into a high lunge, or maybe it will be not so much. It might be a little bit of a wobbly shape. So pointing the hips forward, keeping the heel in the air. We're going to bend this left knee and get a little higher up, and then straighten out that left leg, see what happens to the torso. Bend the knee, pick up the front of the pelvis, and then straighten, straighten the leg out. And then one more time, bend the knee. Now if you can bend your knee really close to the ground, you're welcome to do that. This is about as far as my quads say we can go. And we'll hold it steady, or fall over, one of the two. One more breath. Beautiful. So then we're going to fold ourselves forward, straightening out that leg. We're going to take ourselves to downward facing dog. If I can get my leg off the mat. Hold and steady for a moment. Just feel the difference between the left and right. Come forward into a plank. Now you can do a full plank and hold that steady, or you can modify your plank. You can do a half modification where you've got one straight leg. So we're going to do 2 more big breaths. Hold and steady and strong in that plank. Now you lower down, you can go halfway to chaturanga, or you can go all the way to the floor, come into a cobra or an upward dog, whatever back bend is your fave. And then take yourself back to down dog. Take a nice big breath, lift your left leg up behind you. Give it a little hook over your back if it feels okay, then bring it in and round. Give it a stretch back, sink into the right heel. Hook it over, Bring it in, round, give it a little stretch back, sink into that right heel if it's available, and then we're gonna step that foot forward, pause, get all the weight in that left leg, bring your right leg up to it, come up halfway, exhale, fold, and then we're gonna come all the way to standing. Oh, give it a big stretch. Give everything a little bit of a shake, and then find yourself back in your mountain pose so that we are able to see if there's a difference between our left and right hemispheres. So we had last time's mountain pose to compare it to. So then we're going to take the weight into the left leg, bring that right ankle up on top, sink it in, hold in that chair pose, balancing pose. Balancing chair, one-legged chair. I don't know what to call this pose. Some people call it temple dancer, but that seems awfully fancy. So to hold it and steady for 2 more breaths. All right, so we're gonna pick it up and step back into a high lunge, hopefully, without breaking a tooth. Alrighty. So I'm going to bend my back knee, pick up the front of the pelvis, and then straighten out that leg, see if my pelvis tilts forward a little bit. And then bend that back knee, pick up the front of the pelvis, straighten out the leg, see if I can hold the pelvis more steady. And then one more time, bend in the knee, and we're going to hold steady here, so if you want, you can bend that knee quite a lot. Just don't go all the way to the ground. So it makes the quads work a little harder. One more big breath. Good. So as you straighten the leg, you're going to fold forward, put your hands on the floor, and step back to down dog. Take a moment to feel that shape, and then you'll move through the vinyasa, choosing the back bend that you like the most. And back into down dog. Taking that right leg up, giving yourself a little hook over, and then bring the knee in, round the back, sink in, bring that leg up and over, bring it straight in, round up. Now as you stretch it back, sink into that left heel if you can. And then we're going to step it forward, however far it goes, put the weight on it, bring your left foot forward, and then come up, fold in, come all the way up to standing, very close to the plants. Oh, give it a stretch. And we find ourselves back at the top of the mountain, in mountain pose. And I don't know about you, but my mountain on this 3rd round feels a little bit more energized than the first 2 rounds. So I'm gonna, again, shift the weight into my right leg. Again, I'm gonna bring this left ankle up on top. And this time I'm gonna add a little twist. So I'm gonna turn towards that left side. Now you could hold on to your knee. If you're closer to a little more compact shape, you might even get that right elbow on the outside of your knee. So holding steady as best you can. We're gonna keep, hold on, I'm gonna try not to break a tooth. We're gonna keep that twist and step into warrior 2. Okay, so we're coming back and over into a side angle shape, and then reverse warrior, and a side angle, and a reverse warrior. And a side angle. And so we're going to hold this side angle for a moment. You can move a little bit one way or another. Okay, now we're going to turn this into a triangle pose. So adjusting as needed so that your leg is straight. And then if you care to, you can have the arms positioned away from each other, or you could wrap that top arm and do a little bind. taking a big breath here, and then we're going to put both hands on the floor and step back into down dog with the exhale. Okay. Feel the difference between the two sides. Holy moly. And then coming forward into a plank. Again, we're going to hold this plank for a few breaths, so modify it appropriately. Really draw in through your navel, hug the sides of your waist in, keep your spine nice and long, 2 more breaths. And then exhale and lower down, come into your cobra or your up dog. Take it back into your down dog. We're going to take this left leg, bring it up, and then we're going to try to bring it to this outside left elbow, and bring it back to the outside left elbow. Bring it back one more time to that outside left elbow. Doesn't matter if it touches, stretch it back, bring it forward. Again, shift your weight towards that leg and then step forward with your right. Come up halfway, fold, and then come all the way to standing. Give yourself a nice big stretch. Ooh, find your mountain pose. So you can feel the differences. Okay, so we're going to bring this right leg up on top, sink in a bit, a little or a lot, and then add the twist. I'm trying to more or less hold my hips steady as I hold this position with my body. Okay, take a breath. We're going to try to hold the twist and then step back into warrior 2. I'm going to just turn around 180 degrees. So my voice gets projected your way, and then we'll come back to reverse warrior and over to side angle. Oh. Reverse. Side angle. Oh. Reverse. Oh. And then we're going to snuggle into side angle pose. Adjustments, but maybe be a little more gentle than I may, or keep your eyes open, one of the two. Closed eyes are trickier. One more breath here, and then we're going to morph that into a triangle shape. Again, kind of playing with your pose and choosing how the pose goes. So we're going to take this pose and turn it into a wide angle forward bend. So I'm just going to move my feet so that they point towards the long edge of the mat, and decide, like, should they point a little more pigeon-toed, should they be slightly out, exactly parallel. Your hips and your knees will tell you. There's a binding sensation, especially at the hip or the knee. Turn your toes out a little bit until it feels better. You can bend the knee quite a lot so that you can get the chest a little more in contact with the thighs. Everybody's body's a little different, so choose appropriately for you. Don't tear things out of your butt. You don't want to tear all the muscle attachments off your pelvis. Be kind. Two more breaths. Up so that we're about halfway up, and then we're going to add a little bit of a twist. So I'm going to push my right hand into the floor, turn with my left. Now you can extend the arm if you like. I generally just let it go with my torso here. So twist to the left, twist to the right. And I'm mostly trying to put as much of this into my spine as possible. Letting the hips help a little bit, more or less trying to keep in the spine. One more time on each side. And then we're going to walk this thing around and turn it into downward dog. Now, take a moment and play with your dog. You can make it a dancing dog as you like. Now we're going to come all the way down to the belly. So you can lower down in the way that makes the most sense to you. We're going to do 5 little cobras. We're going to move the hands each time. So start with the hands a little higher up. Press the legs into the ground. Really work the front of your pelvis and then lift as much as your back muscles will lift, not your arms. Slide your hands back an inch or so. Lift. Pull the collarbones a little wider. Slide them back about an inch or so. Work the legs. Come on up. Get another inch. Work your legs. This starts to get a little tricky in the wrist. Just take your hands up a little onto the fingertips. Slide them back one more time. Open up the collarbones, lift the legs, and then sustain that as best you can from your crown of your head all the way through your toes. Lengthening out, especially the front of that hip. Shoulders are broad, or collarbones anyway, but all of the shoulder can broaden out. One more breath. We're going to come on down. Now we're going to take this right leg up and over, so I'm going to go all the way to the edge of my right side of my mat, put my right leg on the floor, and then push up so that I'm sitting. Now, you'll be facing the back side of your mat, so if you need to switch around, you can. And I've got this leg up, because that's how it landed. So I'm going to drop it out to the side, and then I'm going to take this left leg and move it on a diagonal. Now, a little diagonal, big diagonal, that's up to you and your hips. I'm going to leave the foot in the center, but you can bring your right foot all the way up to the edge. So we're going to do this pose kind of in 3 sections. So first section, sit up tall, rotate to your right. If you want to bring the knee back up for this section, you can. Now I find myself leaning off of my left sit bone, so I'm going to try to re-weight that sit bone, get a little taller, and twist, and then I'm going to do some work with my neck. So first I'm going to relax my face, especially around my mouth. So my lips are super soft. Then I'm going to turn my head on my inhale towards my left shoulder. And on the exhale, I'm going to turn my head over my right shoulder. Now I have my eyes closed, but you could do this with your eyes open. Inhale to the left. Exhale to the right. And just do that twice more. Keep the torso with the twist so that the only thing changing shapes is the neck. Okay, so second pose is a side bend. So I'm going to take my left arm to my left thigh and then bring myself, still kind of turning towards that right side, into the side bend. Some people can get close enough in the side bend to hold onto their toes. For those of us for whom that's ridiculous, really you just want to go to the point where you feel this area of your back stretching. Don't go too far, it's a sensitive area of your back. If you're really pushy, you might pay later. Let the breath do most of the work for you. So the breath is really giving you that little extra bit of stretch as it comes in. Last one. Now we're going to come all the way up. Return to the center. Pause for a moment. I'm going to let the spine kind of change. And I'm just doing these little kind of jiggle my rib cage back and forth, do a little seated cat-cowy kind of shapes, just to kind of move the fluid in my spine a bit. Once it feels like I'm no longer side bending, then I'm ready for the last step, which is folding forward. Now again, I have this a little on the wide side. You can bring this leg right back into the center and hold on to it if you want to. I'm going for something that's somewhere between the Janu Shirsasana and half of an Upavista Konasana. Because I kind of like weird in-between shapes, y'all. That's my jam. Now I have the choice between, what my pelvis stops there, okay? So I can stay up here with the torso, so it's in line with the pelvis, or I can let my upper back round over. Now there are consequences, so I feel a lot more sensation in my low back when I round over. It's not unpleasant, but if it were, then I might not want to do that shape because the consequences might be too much, right? So sometimes consequences are good, sometimes not so good. You decide what that means, because you're the only one feeling the pose in your body. So one more big breath. And then we're going to inhale the weight all the way up. Ooh, we're going to straighten out that leg. I'm going to go back into some cobras. So I'm going to essentially just bring my right leg back with me as I roll back onto the belly. And then, I need to move all the way to the left, so I'm just going to do that now. And then come into cobra. And these are going to need to be little baby cobras because we've just done some weirder stuff with our back. So we're just engaging the muscles and lengthening out, lifting. Come back a little. Engage the muscle on the front of the hip and in your spine, or at least surrounding your spine, if not the ones in between. Last one, we're going to lift the legs and the torso. Draw the chest wide. Really feel yourself open the front of your hip. Take one more breath. And then we're going to come down. Left leg bends. Bring that foot to the ground. Follow it up. And then we're going to drop that guy open. And again, you may have to do a little switcheroo. One of the beauties of having a round yoga mat is it does not matter which direction you're facing. Like, it's all the same. But if that is not true at your house, do what you need. So my left knee is a little more sensitive, so I've got a little support here with the blanket. And then I'm going to sit up tall and twist. So that's my first pose. Noticing that I'm leaning off my right side, I'm going to see if I can get that side a little heavy again. Let the twist be more about my upper back. And then I'm going to turn my head. So I look over both shoulders, but keep the twist through the rest of my torso stable. This feels really good to my neck, this sort of pendiculative approach to yoga. And the word pendiculative is fun to say, so. Okay, last breath here. And again, we're going to turn this into the side bend. So I'm going to let my head turn back. I've got my eyes closed, but you might want to keep yours open. Oh, sorry, buddy. And then we're going to side bend over. And as I bend, I'm going to make adjustments so that my hip and my low back and my rib cage and all the obliques, everything's getting the right amount of stretch. And I'm not overdoing things or angling my hip in a way that causes trouble for me. The older I get, the more sensitive I get to these little joint adjustments. I'm glad that I'm more sensitive to them. I fear that the reason I'm more sensitive is because I've used myself and I'm jumping. Like, I did yoga poses way too deep 30 years ago, and now I'm in trouble. So we're just breathing. I'm not worrying about getting into any kind of crazy contortionist level of pose. Again, feel that lower part of your back on your left side if you're bending over to the right. So take in 2 more breaths here. Feel how the breath automatically stretches that area a little bigger as you inhale. So we don't have to go all the way to the edge. So we're going to come back up. I'm going to take a moment and let my spine kind of come back to neutral. So when we bend the spine sideways, when we rotate the spine, the fluid level in the disc shifts, so it allows that movement. And so before I forward bend, which is one of the most tricky poses for the spine, I like to do these shapes that kind of ask some fluid to move, get the spine a little lubricated, so we're building fluid layers. And then also, I want my spine to be neutral before I take it into this forward bend, so I give it the time it needs. So then, as I forward bend, right, again, my pelvis is only going to come so far. Some of you, you'll find your pelvis tilts backwards, not forwards. And so then you really have to decide, do I want to lean backwards into it, or do I want to let myself round forward? And it really depends on the sensation. Right? There's lots of rules out there about how you should practice yoga, and mostly the rule, as far as I'm concerned, is if it hurts, or even if you get like a little nagging sensation that's like, well, that's weird. how it goes if you approach the pose a little bit more conservatively or cautiously. With a little more kindness. How's that? We'll say that. So soft in the mouth. Letting the back do the work. Maybe the hamstrings are really stretching and you have a little bit more bend in your knee, or maybe that feels really good. 2 more breaths. So just as a sensation example, take a big inhale, and then we'll come all the way up. So when I lean forward and keep my chest up, I feel almost nothing right around the edges where my sacrum and my lumbar spine meet. So the L5, S1, L5, L4, that little area where your 2 lowest lumbar vertebrae and the top of your sacrum tends to be the most vulnerable for a lot of us. That's where most disc injuries occur that are kind of like chronic lifestyle issue disc injuries, right? More people get herniated discs there than almost anywhere else. Now this is shifting with computers to include the neck as well. But if I let myself round forward with one leg different than the other, I really feel a shift in the sacrum. So it doesn't feel painful to me, but it feels weird enough that I'm feeling like I want to be conservative. And I'm hoping that makes sense, because that's kind of what we're going for when we're doing our practice, is we want to go for sensation that feels really good, but anything that starts to get into like, I don't know about that sensation spectrum, we want to be more cautious with. So before we do Shavasana, we're going to do one more pose, and it's going to either be a butterfly shape, or you can do a wide angle shape, or you can put both legs in the front. It's just make sure they're the same, right? So both legs are doing the same thing. So I get invited into this pose differently than I do when one leg is different than the other. So that's something to be make a note of, and to pay attention to in your practice. So we're not sort of slapping, oh, I can do this in this pose, so it'll work in the other pose. May not. And so choosing your pose and folding forward. Now, forward bends are a way to kind of collect and quiet down our energy. At least this is what the yogis say in the Middle Ages. The books that were written in the Middle Ages, that we get some kind of notions about yoga poses and the way poses feel based on commentaries from different sages over the years about those particular documents. There was a lot of documents produced in the Middle Ages. Luckily, many of them were compiled into a single volume called the Pradipika, but in any case, it's interesting to kind of look at these notions of how yoga poses are supposed to make us feel, and then try them and see if it works for you. I find forward bends a little more centering and calming, and back bends a little more brightening and lifting. So if I need a more brightened, lifted day, I might focus more on the back bendy end of things. And if I'm having a day where I'm feeling a little overextended and I need to conserve my energy, forward bends work for me. But you try it, see if that's true for you. All right, I've got a blanket here for my head, and then I'm also going to put a little pillow under my knees because I want to do the most relaxed Shavasana I can get to. If you don't have pillows, like you could do throw pillows or a pillow from your bed. You don't have to be fancy yoga pillows, although they're nice. Don't get me wrong. You don't have to have them though. For many, many, many years, couch cushions worked really great in my world. So you could use a couch cushion if you got one. And then just let yourself relax a little more deeply and let go, because this pose might be the most important pose that we do, because it's the chance for our nervous system to integrate everything we've just done, for all of our connective tissue to release, right? We did all the stretching in these really sensitive muscles in the body, the ones that run up and down our spine, the ones that are around our pelvis, our hip flexors. These are muscles that are super sensitive to our emotional states because they're fight or flight muscles. They help us run or fight or move. And so we want those to all really relax. So we're not tugging on the nervous system at all. And then as the nervous system lets go, then we slide into the parasympathetic relaxation state. All kinds of shifting occurs in our body. So just focus on your breath. You don't have to mess with it. Just watch it. Just pay attention to the sensation of the body receiving the inhale and letting go of the exhale. relax everything. Take a moment and notice your breath again if you've lost track. Take a breath so deep you can feel it to your toes. Let it go with a big sigh. And then you can wiggle your fingers and toes. Stretch out. Oh, and wiggle. Stretch out. Oh, and do little wrist and ankles. And then give your whole body a nice big stretch. And then curl it in. Give yourself a little hug and a back massage. And roll to your side. So we're going to bring ourselves to a seated position. Take a big breath together. Take a nice big inhale. Big deep sigh. Namaste.